Hello.
Hey.
Russell's asking me to get closer to him.
That's
I don't know
right.
why.
Yeah, no.
Oh, because you want everyone to see the camel.
Yeah, that's right.
We're in our camel training yards actually. We've got some hay here because it's lucerne and we didn't want them to eat it all at once, so it's in a confined area. We've got Gary up the back here, and there's Jesper walking past there. Isn't he adorable? These are probably the youngest camels we have.
They're the youngest.
Yeah, like we had a few babies, but they passed away. Well, not babies, but anyway, that story's on YouTube, so you can see that. But we wanted to pop in here and say hi.
That's it. And what
Well, that's
going
not it.
Well, no, really. What we wanted to do was to give you some history, a history lesson.
Ooh, and why we actually started sharing camel training information. Because, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's not a lot out there. And, yeah, well, should we start right from the start?
Well, I'm going to actually start with my very first camel, and her name was Megs. And
which is short for...
a big, long name.
Say it.
It's a big, long name. And
You got to say it now. Everyone's super curious.
No. There is a reason, but
okay, we'll save that for another time.
Another time, yeah. But yeah, I got Megs when I was actually teaching out in the desert, out at a place called Warracoona.
In Australia, of course.
In Australia,
yep.
That's right, in the Gibson Desert. And I moved there because I wanted to be near where I knew there were camels, okay, the feral camels out there. And I wanted to be near the camels so that I could, well, I was trying to find out. Yeah, I'd spent a couple of years, quite a number of years beforehand.
This is before we met, by the way.
Yeah, I spent a couple of years of trying to, you know, get camels beforehand and find out information, etc. And you know, I found it really hard. Right? Yeah. It was really hard.
And if you can relate to this, let us know in the comments. Like, I mean, maybe you bought a camel and then it's all well and good and you're like, oh, now the fuck. Oh, I swore. Now the fuck what? Expect some F-bombs, I mean.
Yeah. So anyway, I was out there at Warracoona and a little baby camel had been brought into the community by the Aboriginal people.
Was it orphaned?
It was orphaned, yeah. And I could see the camp dogs were just licking their chops at this little baby camel hanging around
just thinking it would be
the
nice
house,
to eat.
you know. And so I asked the owner, or the bloke that brought him in, I said, can I buy this camel from you? And he said, yeah, I suppose. I said,
how much?
How much? And I said, oh, well, how much milk have you given it? And he said, oh, about $30. And I said, well, what else is going to happen to it? And he said, oh, the camp dogs will probably get to it. And I said, well, rather than the camp dogs get to it, how about I pay you what you've already put into the camel? And
which is $30.
Which was $30.
You paid $30
I
for a
paid
camel.
$30
Oh my
for
God,
Megs,
guys,
yeah?
can you believe that? He paid $30 for a camel.
That's right.
I don't think that's heard of.
So I went home, got a piece of rope, and put it around her neck. Didn't know any knots at that stage, and just a knot, you know, some sort of
granny knot.
Oh, who knows what it was. And I took her home to my place at the yard there, and then I thought, well, it's only a baby, it still needs milk, and I know from my research from years prior to this that the camel needed non-lactose milk powder.
You knew that?
I knew that.
Oh.
So I did some research and anyway I found a place
in
that
a library,
was
or
willing.
was Google available?
No, Google wasn't. I had to use a telephone.
Oh, I had to use a telephone.
An actual, you know, with a wire telephone. And anyway, I found a stock feed, and he was willing to ship up or transport to Warracoona bags of Denkovit was the name of it.
Right.
You know, that was the preparation. And at $400 a bag.
Oh yeah.
All right,
Was it camel milk specifically?
Nope.
No, it's just
Nope. I was being ripped off, but I didn't know that at the time.
Well, you.
Right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
You had no Google to help.
I had nothing, right? And anyway, so this camel and I, we'd go for walks and things like that, but I didn't understand it. And
Understand the camel.
I didn't understand how it was thinking. You know, like I'd had some experience with horses before, and I'd certainly had experience with dogs. And,
Hi, if you just joined us, let us know where you're from.
it's Riaz. Hi, Riaz.
Oh gosh, I can't read that from here.
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah, can't read up front. But,
We know where you're from, Riaz. You can
Yeah,
tell us
and anyway, I went ahead and fed this camel, the Denkovit, and I was watching what it was eating out there in the desert. But I still couldn't figure out how it thought, and how to train it. I thought of all the things that I'd done with dog training.
Yes.
And
As most people do. I mean, if you can relate to this, just, leave us a comment like, yep, thumbs up, whatever.
got it.
Like,
Yeah, that's it.
most of us start this way because of the lack of camel information.
Oh, that's it. And anyway, of course, I was still ringing up places, trying to find information about how to train camels and what to do.
Which most people do because,
Yeah.
I mean, by the time people get to us and on a
They're
Google search
exhausted.
or whatever, they're like, you wouldn't believe how much I've called other people, blah, blah, blah. So,
Yeah. No,
this
that's
is,
it.
I mean, what your story, how old is that story?
This is 20 odd years ago now.
More because the
more than
camels,
that, probably.
yeah.
About that.
25-ish.
Well, I mean, altogether it'd be 25
Yeah.
on the whole story.
So that
and
still is
camels,
the
yeah.
thing today. It's still really hard to get good quality camel information, and even with a good Google search. So,
No, that's right.
yeah.
So anyway, I had Megs, and anyway, we had to. We got a transfer in the teaching department up to the northern part of Western Australia at a community right on the very top part of the Western Australian state called Columbaroo. So what else was I going to do? I mean, I put Megs in the back of the ute that I had, a 1975 Dodge ute, and off we went for quite an adventure. And it took a couple of weeks and getting her in and out of the
The story
ute.
on how you got her in there was funny in the first
let's
place.
not
We won't
even
go in
there,
that
no.
today,
It's-
but this is what it was like. I mean,
had to do it.
yeah,
I had to do it. I had a dream. I had a goal. And
which was to walk across Australia.
that's right,
Yeah.
with a bunch of camels.
Yeah.
And anyway, we got to Columbaroo, and then we got to Darwin after a year at Columbaroo, and I still didn't understand how this camel thought. That was the thing. I just couldn't figure it out. And you might be in the same boat.
Let us know because
You've got a camel, new camel. Yeah, you thought
I mean,
it'd be a
I
great
can
idea.
think of some camels that are in our paddock over here. Like we've got the main herd over here. We've got the two little boys in here that we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah,
like
sure.
we'll bounce ideas off each other and sometimes get in an argument like, no, that's not right. This is right, rah. But there's still,
I'm usually right.
yeah, I'm usually right.
There we
99%.
go. This is starting to worry.
And but the truth is some just like camels, like they're not all the same because
No.
they have different personalities. There are types of camels,
But
I think.
in saying that, there's a framework within the camels, okay, and that's what we've worked on over these years.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's like
using-
a genetic makeup and their psychology, which we've sort of blended into our training
Yeah.
to go, right, well, this works for every camel, or we might need to tweak it a little bit for this and that, and Mr. and Mrs. over there, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
works.
So getting back to the story, had Megs for a couple of years, right? Loved her to pieces, of
Tiger
course, but
teacher.
still couldn't figure her out. And unfortunately, I had to shift her from one farm to another. And that night, she tripped or fell down a hole or something and broke her leg, front leg. And so I wasn't sure if it was fully broken, okay, because it was so swollen that the leg was actually stiff. And so I unrolled my bedroll or swag next to her and camped next to her in a paddock out in the bushland of the Northern Territory. Not near anything, no near shops or anything. It was just next to her. After being to the vet and got anti-inflammatories and painkillers and all sorts of things, and eventually we realised that it was broken, and 'cause I couldn't move her. She was too big, and in that location it was too much to move her, and she died. She died of septicemia.
So that was your first camel, and that ended really badly.
Yeah. So it actually took me a couple of years of getting over her death, because I hope that you don't have this experience.
No.
But a camel death, it's severe. It really pulls at the heartstrings. And it took me a couple of years, but I kept on thinking, the idea that I've got, it's worth it. Okay, it's worth it to continue on. It's worth
we
the
can never
struggle.
fully protect ourselves from heartache anyway. Like, you know,
That's
life
right.
happens. So, you know, you had this dream and you continue to pursue with it, which brings us back to exactly why we're here. You know,
That's
why
right.
we have this Facebook page, why we have our website, and why when you Google camel training, where the first thing that comes up is because we are so damn passionate about educating people. And you know, camel training is such a broad subject, but what we focus on and hone in on is the psychology of the camel. And because if you don't have that, and if you don't know that, it's like, well, what's the point? You can do all the practical and logical things. I mean, we've got Jasper behind us here, and we could do the things with him, the actionable things.
Yep.
But without actually understanding him, there's no connection, there's no trust, there's no proper bond, and that's what makes the difference.
Well, also, once you understand the animal, and the animal understands you on a heart-to-heart level, a soul-to-soul level, I mean, you know, actually looking at the person within, and they're doing the same, that's when the real learning occurs, from both ends of the stick.
And I think also fear has a lot to do with it. So like when something comes into our lives that we don't understand, we fear it. And so therefore we want to do. We want to do the action things to control it or to manipulate it into a way that's going to behave for us. And that happens a lot with new camel owners. So they opt for the do training. You know, like, okay, well, let's just learn how to do this, but not learn how to actually think, like learn about the camel's psychology and how they're thinking when we're doing these things. And I think that's, and then you're stripping back also your ego layers. Like ego plays a big part in camel training, because if you have it when you walk into a yard like this, you know, you're not setting yourself up for success. And we teach a lot about that. Like, is that you've got to just leave all your baggage, or as I say, leave all your shit at the gate, and then, you know, go into a camel training or a camel handling session like that. I mean, even on our camel treks, it's the same. Like, we've had treks that are really full of ego and all that sort of stuff, and then it just turns out to be the camels just go hypo, like they're just like misbehave because of all this. They just don't resonate with that at all. They just don't understand ego, and it scares them.
Oh, it does, that's right. And so, anyway, getting back to my story.
Oh, yes, the story.
Yeah, so...
Does it end?
So one night, yeah, it does end. One night I'm sitting at home after being tour guiding out there at Kakadu National Park. And if you're from overseas and you don't know Kakadu National Park, if you've watched the movie Crocodile Dundee, that's the area,
That's so
okay,
cool.
where I used to play
Thumbs
with...
up if you've watched
play
Crocodile
with people.
Dundee.
Yeah, I think Riaz, you've been there, haven't you? Anyway, I was Googling and I came across Phil G's Wild Camel Handling
Actually,
course.
This is when Google came into
This is
into
when
life.
Google came into my life. And so I rang him up and I told him of my idea of what I wanted to do. And he just said, yep, you need my course. So I did it, and I was amazed that, you know, in a short period of time,
you knew nothing, and going through all this heartache to going, I'm on a track.
We'd actually, yeah, there was actually, you know, some sort of structure and involved with it. So to cut a very long story short, I worked with Phil for quite a number of years, and you know, certainly trained a lot of camels with him and other people as well. And then, you know, I've gone and listened to other cameliers, and I've listened to other ideas from overseas, and, you know, tips, and I've got some of my own, and, you know, from the stuff that I learnt with the Aboriginal people, and this was all mished up in my head quite happily, and it was all structured, but it was all there. And then I met Tara, and she asked me the question. She asked me the question, and that question was,
well, I asked him, I said, what is your passion here? I mean, why are you walking out with camels in the desert, basically? And, you know, what's your real passion? What's your heart's desires? And you said that you wanted to share the magnificence of these animals, that you wanted people to see and know these animals like you do.
Yep.
And then I'm like, great, let's do it.
So here we are. Basically, I wish it was that simple, but
I mean, it's been what, 6 years, but we got there in the end. And you know, we've gone through a lot of shifts and changes ourselves within our company and within our business, and we're shifting gears and changing things around, and we're learning. I mean, we're going overseas. We've been to Mongolia, the United States, India, Thailand, like learning about camels. I mean, they were work trips, so we were able to teach as well. And what we've noticed across the board is that foundational stuff, or that foundational knowledge that any camel owner or handler must know in order to successfully train and handle camels. You can have one hump camels, you can have two humps, you can have the crossbreeds, or whatever it is. There is a foundational approach, and then obviously working with the individual personalities from there. So that's how we got to where we are.
That's it.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people about Virtual Camel School?
No, I'll let you. You're pretty good at that.
So,
that's my story.
That's Russell's story, and we've got a lot of those stories, and we've got a lot more to come. I'll be sharing mine later this week about horse training and how, that really didn't help me at all with the camel stuff.
Well, look, I'll disagree with that, because it made you realise that the camel is a different species entirely.
Yeah, well, that's true. If you look at the positive light, yeah.
Well, yeah, and things that work with horses don't necessarily work with camels. That being techniques, okay?
Yeah.
So, you learn a lot from just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit more to it, but yeah, besides that. So, guys, if you are watching this video right through and you're really inspired by learning about how a camel actually thinks, oh, I was stepping on the cat's tail. I'm like, what's that noise? Screaming. And it was the cat's tail. We've got these two beautiful little boys here. They're our youngest in our herd. They're about 4 years old, and they're having a good feed up. And, if you are a camel owner, a want-to-be camel owner, or you're simply a camel lover and just want to learn more about camels and how they think, like, Virtual Camel School is definitely something you should consider, because it will just set you up. It will set your foundations right. It's like building a house, right? Like, if you've got your foundation right, everything can go on top right, and it's not going to crumble underneath. But if you build the house without the foundation, the house will eventually, start to, there will be issues. And that's what we're talking about before with the do training, like practical, let's just actionable stuff in training without learning the foundational stuff, which is the camel psychology. Eventually those things are going to come crumbling. The camel's going to end up resisting you, which they always do, by the way. But if you have that knowledge of their thinking, you're like, yeah, I got this. Like, I get that this is a part of who they are, blah, blah, blah. So, So if you want to check out Virtual Camel School, which enrollments are open right this minute, only until Sunday, midnight Sunday in Australia. So that'd be Saturday evening in the United States. Head over to our website, camelconnection.com, and you'll see a nice big shiny banner saying, learn more about Virtual Camel School, because we'd love to have you there. We'll be doing, it's a 4-week program, so we'll be doing live trainings like this. So you get a pre-recorded training where you learn some of the foundational stuff that is part of our online course, and then we'll be jumping on live with you just like this, where we'll be going into more detail on the camel psychology and troubleshooting, and you get to ask questions and actually do some real learning. So it'll be so good. Yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
And I'm happy to have shared my story with you. I do tell it in my book, Camelman Dreaming, but and you actually learn the full name of Megs in the book.
So there you go. You have to buy the book.
That's right, just to find the full
learn
name.
the full name of Megs.
That's right. And perhaps you've got a story as well, which we'd love to hear. It's all about connection, and it's not just the connecting with the camel, but also with each other in many ways, because we're all learning. We're all wanting to learn. We're all on the same pathway, and that we want the best for our camels.
Yep.
And that's the important thing. That I realised at the early piece, I needed to be with a cameleer who not only was ethical, okay, and not only knew what he was talking about, but also was willing to teach me. And three major things there, and I had to like him. All right,
yeah, of course. You have to like whoever's.
So yeah, very appreciative that I found Phil G at the very beginning of my practical side of actually moving forward.
Formulating this Camel Connection trust-based camel
Sure.
training. So
Yeah.
great. Guys, go to our website, have a look. I know you have to leave your social platforms in order to go to a website, but it's well worth the look because we're so used to being on social media. We're like, oh, you know, like like I'm like that. Scroll. I'd really like to have a look at it, but I'd have to leave Instagram.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit. But anyway, we promise it would be worth
Is that
it.
a question?
Worth a look. I cannot see. Good knowledge. Oh, hi. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful.
And yeah, please tell
Thank
us
you.
your camel story in the comments below, wherever you're watching this. We'd love to learn more about you and your camel story.
All right.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Right up. Catch you later.
Bye. Bye, Jesper. Bye, Gary. They're in the background.